firstly, I'd like to just say welcome to Cascadia, both the place, the festival, and
state of mind.
And the state of mind. There we go. And so you're all very welcome. And if you need more chairs, we have more chairs. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, good. And we have something to flip this.
You can have a volunteer here, or
Yeah. Someone here.
hey.
All right.
Okay. So I'll just gesture while.
See the arrow keys.
Are you cool with video?
What's that?
Cool with video?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
I think we can go ahead and flip to the first slide. So I guess to start, we'd like to say welcome to Cascadia. And Cascadia is just another way to talk about the Pacific Northwest. And more commonly, it's the watersheds of the Fraser River in British Columbia, the Columbia River in Washington, and the Snake River in Oregon. And these rivers and watersheds flow together to form what is known as the Cascadia Bioregion, which is a way to think about the Pacific Northwest in a way that is a little bit more interconnected. It's an interconnected ecology, it's an interconnected people, and it's an interconnected geology, language, and everything else. Secondly, it's an emerging kind of social, cultural movement full of cascading water in the back, which you can hear. But the social movement really just exists to empower individuals and communities to get active around things they care about. And so that could be anything that people care about, that's each going to be different. It's going to be different for all of us. But working together, we will create a hub where everybody can kind of raise that awareness and kind of create a true impact here in the Pacific Northwest. Through that, we're creating kind of an emerging regional identity. We say regional identity as opposed to a national identity or anything else. And it's an identity kind of rooted in a love of place. And it all stems from that. It's an emerging culture that flows out of this place that we call Cascadia, that we call home. And it kind of lets us explore what it means to be an actual inhabitant of this region, rather than just living here or being residents. Through that, we're building a vision, and that's a vision that we can kind of be building together. And it's a vision that we're building through shared principles, shared values, and that we'd be working towards. More than anything, it's positive and it's inclusive. We can talk about Cascadia in several different ways. We have our watershed map, and so that's our ecological boundaries. It flows all the way up from southeast Alaska in the north, down to northern California, just north of San Francisco, but through the redwoods, and all the way out east to the Yellowstone, caldera, which actually creates the start of the Columbia River. We can talk about culture. So culture is the sum of our choices, kind of a lot of these larger issues broken down to a local level, where we can really start talking about influencing decisions and influencing our habits, which collectively cause a lot of those larger issues. Lastly, it's kind of a shared history, and that starts with the indigenous people who lived here long before the area was settled or colonized. But then it stems through the Oregon territories, into the Oregon country, into the 19th century, and now where we are today. So to start, Cascadia is rooted in a concept kind of called bioregionalism, and this bioregionalism flows from these watersheds. This is a picture of the Columbia River Basin, and this is just one of the 3 different watersheds, and as well as the Cascade Mountain Range, which flows all the way up to the Copper River in Alaska. Go to the next slide. So here we have the Salish Sea ecoregion. This is also known as the Cascadia Megaregion. And this is a place that's used by federal policymakers as well as regional planners, geographers, academics to think about basically 12% of the land mass that contains 85% of the population of the entire Northwest. This picture was captured by the International Space Station and really shows how we are one connected region. What happens in Seattle affects the people who live in Vancouver, What happens in Vancouver affects Bellingham and Victoria. This is all one system rooted together. So, next slide. When we start to talk about our culture, I like to kind of explore this idea of culture mapping. And so while we have our eco-regional boundaries, it's not a whole picture because it also has to include the people who live here. And it's about us developing and finding more holistic and interconnected ways that we can live sustainably and lessen our impact in a responsible way in this place that we live. Here on the left, we have an MIT study coming out of 2011 exploring cell phone communication patterns. So this is how we talk. And we start to see a lot of different regions kind of emerge. And these regions just happen to follow these bioregional watershed boundaries where we're starting to have natural culture that stems from place. And that culture is kind of emerging from these shared principles, shared values that kind of necessarily come from living in the same region, having the same concerns, having a similar economy in the way that we're talking and working together. On our right, we have kind of how we spend our money. And so this is a source. The source is Where's George projects, and so it's kind of a money tracking thing. You might see it, you'll get little stamps on dollar bills. And what's fun is there are people logging that all around the country. And so through this, then they're able to kind of collect and collate that data to also form a regional map of where are we spending our money and where does that money travel to, and then where does it come back to. And again, through all of these, we kind of see Cascadia emerge. We can go to the next slide. Again, I think with Cascadia, I really like to when we talk about culture, I like to talk about sports. I don't know anything about sports, but I'll talk about it with Cascadia. So here we have the United States of Baseball, and you kind of see where the support flows from. There's only one baseball team in the Northwest, and so you start to see this kind of collection form. This is from the 2014 Super Bowl. I think this is really interesting because all these articles were coming out when we were playing San Francisco or playing Denver of how the United States hates the Northwest and all the rest of this. And so this is a map of who supported who in the upcoming matches towards the Super Bowl. So in the first map, we have us playing San Francisco. And what you see, what's really fun, is almost the entire United States was kind of against Cascadia, and as well as this kind of southern border. But then when we play Denver, all of a sudden, this Cascadia bioregion starts to emerge. And so I like to talk about this continuity between culture and ecology and economy and geology, as well as our languages. Another kind of fun thing with sports is that Cascadia is soccer country. And so I don't know, are any of you guys like Sounder fans or White Cup fans or follow soccer at all? All right. Okay. Well, so anyways, the Pacific Northwest is one of the heights for the MLS. And what I find very interesting is starting in 2004, before any of these teams even joined any big leagues, there were very strong supporter groups. And these are fan-based, non-for-profit community groups that formed to support their teams. And out of this kind of emerged this very vibrant and passionate supporter base. And through that, we've had some amazing displays. And this is Vancouver, this is Portland, this is Seattle. And all three of those teams now play for the Cascadia Cup, which was a supporter-driven cup that was established before they joined the MLS, and now they still play. What I like is how subversive even the idea of Cascadia can be, even when it's in something as kind of publicized and consumerized as sports. This right here is this was at a match in Portland back in 2013 when Portland hosted the U.S. men's national team when they were playing against some other country. But rather than Uncle Sam, they raised Cascadia Sam. So kind of to differentiate where we come from. Go to the next. We have Cascadia cuisine. I think this is also really interesting where we can start to talk about localization. We grow 93% of the hops in the country, and so we have this kind of emerging microbreweries and kind of home brewing and all the rest of it. Let's get to this. And out of this, we kind of also have a shared history. This history dates back to when Lewis and Clark first started to explore this region and found a region inhabited by more than 1 million kind of coastal Salish peoples as well as inland that together all formed a continuous Northwest. What's really interesting is if you look at the language groups, even of how they traded, if you look at the coastal trading patterns, the linguistic, in the Chinook language group, it's almost exactly a clear outline of exactly this bioregion. And so it really shows how this kind of culture and kind of these trading networks of dependency emerge from a shared region. So the idea of Cascadia kind of almost even dates back to the first time you start to hear the mention of the Cascades is the Scottish botanist David Douglas in the 1820s when he was exploring the Columbia River, and he named this region kind of where he saw these cascading waterfalls. And it was that first written mention where the Cascade Mountains actually take their name. And that's the same David Douglas also that the Douglas fir was then named after. The idea of Cascadia, rooted in this idea of bioregionalism. Bioregionalism then emerged in the 1970s. It came out of Northern California. You had Peter Berg with the Planet Drum Foundation. You had a whole lot of thinking and meeting, and there were bioregional congresses that started to happen all around the Northwest. From that, there was also an author, Ernest Kallenbach, who kind of had this first kind of radical utopian envisioning. He wrote a book called Ecotopia in the early 1970s, which is still very influential. It had really radical notions like recycling and other things, and he also kind of envisioned the whole point was it was in the future where the Northwest had broken off in a way and formed an actual ecotopian society where the cities had been rewilded and depaved and everybody walked around on dirt paths and had things like public transportation and composting. So, and back then these were all very radical notions that have all of a sudden become very incorporated. And so when you read it today, it almost feels dated because you're like, there's nothing shocking or in this. The term Cascadia itself started to come about through geological terms in the 1980s. David McCloskey is kind of credited with kind of coining the term Cascadia in 1981. He was a professor at Seattle University, and he coined this term Cascadia to describe a region and a bioregion that he felt was kind of ecologically and culturally distinct from surrounding areas. So to take it back to this whole kind of concept of bioregionalism, it starts here. It starts with our roots. So find your place on the planet, dig in, and take responsibility from there. I really like, there's Dennis Hayes, there's an organization called the Bullitt Foundation in Seattle. It's very prolific. They just built one of the greenest office buildings in the world. They got an $8 million grant from the Department of Energy. It was this huge thing. It's got living walls. It generates its own power, collects its own water. And the person who runs it, their executive director, Dennis Hayes, was very big in kind of getting Earth Day established in the 1990s. And he was asked, you could have gone anywhere, but why did you choose to found an organization that was rooted here? And he talks about a Cascadia sustainability movement. And with that if change and real change is going to happen, it will start here, and it will be rooted here. We have the means and the capability and the culture that is starting to emerge. And so when that change happens here, we can build a model that we can help replicate elsewhere. And so now what we're talking about is building a model where we can be held accountable for our actions, accountable and responsible for our impact in the world abroad, and kind of fit in a responsible manner. And I think that that's very powerful. So Cascadia Now is actually a 501c3 nonprofit, and we only exist to help empower a positive, vibrant, inclusive Cascadia movement. And the Cascadia movement, what's amazing is when we talk about a social movement, it means that it spreads person to person, that we each get to talk about the things that we find important. And so what we want to do is really work to try and build a hub where every person can bring those issues to the forefront, find solidarity and support, raise awareness for that, and help create the biggest impact possible. Our vision and mission has kind of never changed, and that is for us to kind of really have a resilient and autonomous bioregion. We really push for this idea of kind of a bioregional footprint, and and that means kind of keeping all of our kind of means of production and really pulling it back in where we can have an impact. And that's in our neighborhoods, it's in our communities, and that's where we can really make change happen. We like to, let's see, you can go to the next slide. We've been featured by all of these people, and it's kind of interesting. So Cascadia Now is in an interesting evolution. It first started in 2005. The idea of Cascadia has been around since the 1980s, but in 2005 it got started. There was a group of us, and we were taking a class at Seattle Central Community College on kind of decolonizing methodologies. And one of those processes was an envisioning, where you envision the world as you would like to see it, without reality to kind of like drag away, without the status quo. And so we stumbled on this idea of Cascadia, and we thought that this was a really good idea. And at that point, I mean, I think I was 19, you know, and so since then, it's been wonderful to see how it's grown and shifted and matured. And through this, it's really fun that we've been picked up, and the interest seems to be really building, both around bioregionalism, as well as kind of Cascadia. And none of these people really know quite what to make of it, so it's interesting. We can go ahead. The duck flag is one of the most common symbols, one of many, that helps represent Cascadia. And what I like about this is that all it is a physical representation of our landscape. It's nothing more than that. And so what we have is we have green for the forests, white for the mountains, blues for the flowing waters that help define Cascadia, and the Douglas fir because it's kind of found throughout the definition of the bioregion.
I've equally heard that the blue is for our skies, but the sky is a reflection of the color of the water.
I think that's wonderful. And sometimes it might be kind of cloudy and gray. What's fun is that this is not the symbol, and actually what's beautiful is to see how every person is able to kind of challenge the idea, think about the idea, and incorporate the things that they find important, and how they're then able to share it with their friends. And so it's always evolving, always changing, down to people are doing different Doug flags for their own ecoregions, with their own predominant. In Bend, Oregon, it's the blackjack. And so in some areas it's the ponderosa pine, and so it can really like adapt to be used for all of these different issues and to help represent different ideas.
I use it back of my business card.
And some people use it as the back of their business card. Excellent. And so then what we start talking about is Cascadia as a positive and personal regional identity. And I like this idea of a identity because this is a personal choice. It's something that we each make. So rather than it being systematic, every person is able to challenge it, look at it, and kind of identify. Through this regional identity, really the key thing is that it's something that we're working towards. And so it's a positive vision that we each get to look at, we each get to take these issues, and then we get to work together. I think this can be very important where oftentimes there are so many issues out there, and so much of it can be very like negative, or we're always fighting, kind of against something. And when we shift that, we create kind of a new framework. And it's a framework that we're able to create. It's a narrative that we're able to share together and to kind of collectively define. So I like to say that we're fighting the idea that basically the American identity, not the political system. And so the reason, there's a lot of different ways that we've kind of like shifted through this. When we started in 2005, we were very politically motivated. And I think as we've traveled through the bioregion, as we've kind of learned more about the concept of bioregionalism and delved deeper into that concept, it's really grown and shifted as more and more people are able to throw in their voices. And I think rather than trying to go into a system that is kind of inherently corrupt in a lot of ways, or very negative or toxic, we're much more interested with reaching out in our communities right now, connecting with the people who are making those changes happen, and really focusing on building this new identity. This means that we're watching, waiting, and we're learning. This is all a collaborative process. And what's really exciting is that we get to be taking this process together with bioregions around the country and around the world. And it's fun to see how this concept of bioregional is emerging, that we're talking with people in Mexico City, we're talking to people in South Africa, we're talking to people in the Great Lakes Basin, and we're all working together to start to try and figure out what's working, what's not. We're learning from each other, and we're building these collaborative models where we're working together in mutually beneficial ways. But the idea is that we can build a model that as we're successful, we can replicate and share the lessons that we've learned and learn the lessons that other people have gained. So then, kind of in closing, what's exciting then is we're talking about a framework. And this is a regional identity that's positive, inclusive, it's personal. And by the personal, it means we get to break these global issues down to a local level and connect people with those change makers who are making it happen on a daily basis out in their communities. It's the personal choices that we make on an everyday basis that together collectively add and create the sum total of a lot of these problems like global warming or ocean acidification. The change starts with each of us and it starts in our communities. It also becomes a lens for a lot of these things where we can examine and critically challenge. It's a scale where connections make sense. Cascadia will never be bigger than the bioregion. We will never try and spread. Rather than starting chapters in Atlanta, we will be working with them to help start their own watershed movements, where they can really be learning from their ground and getting their roots established and growing from the ground up. What I love is also this idea of the subversiveness of place, where we're breaking down a lot of this consumerist society. When we talk about a bioregional footprint, it means that we are cutting off our part in a global consumerist kind of network, where instead we can be focusing on a localization of our resources, of our economy, a kind of a democratization. And through that, by working within this bioregional footprint, we're cutting that chain and making sure that we can actually have a responsible and accountable part of this global system that we can be proud of. So here's, for example, then Cascadia. Yeah, I guess Cascadia Now only exists as an organization to empower the social movement, and that means empower each one of you. It's amazing to see that each one of us interprets the idea differently. Each one of us has issues that we care about passionately, and so rather than define that, what's really important is to create a space where we can all come together, share the issues we care about, find that connection, and then watch it kind of manifest in different ways. And so each of us kind of has this different thing. So one of these is frontline actions. And so you'll see the Cascadia flag at a lot of different areas where we're working to protect the things that we find special about this region. You see it with Cascadia Earth First in Oregon. You see it, it was very active at the Shell No, recent protests in Seattle. But also, what's amazing is you see it throughout the entire Northwest. You'll always see it kind of in different places. This is in Eugene, Oregon. You'll see it at kind of a different. Is that you?
That's me.
So what was this at?
That was I think Occupy Salem.
So
One march to Salem and Occupy.
sometimes you see a lot of beautiful pictures. And the wonderful thing about a social movement is that we do not have to be here to tell. People can go and reach out to the idea, connect with it, and hold it in their own light and in a way that is important and meaningful to them. And together, we can be randomly standing next to each other in a workshop out in the middle of the woods at a crazy festival, sharing these wonderful pictures. So this would be also, so this is also in Eugene, the Tarzan's Blockade. And then more importantly as well, we're talking about inclusivity. By creating a positive vision that we can all be working towards, we create something that we can all be a part of. Oftentimes, when you're kind of fighting against stuff, it can start to become very exclusive. Rather, we want to be building something that people are excited for and kind of tipping it. So that means building this really, inclusive, vibrant movement. It starts with indigenous people. It starts with everything.
It all starts with children.
Indoctrinating the children. Yeah. And And so I think that, the important thing is a primary role and function of Cascadia Now especially is like we think that Cascadia is an excellent idea, but there are also 15 million people living in this region, and we need to reach out to every single one of them. There's going to be 1 million more people just living in the Sailor Sea eco-region within the next 5 to 10 years. And so we are kind of fighting this thing that we want to make sure to build this culture that's rooted in these sustainable principles, and so we can share that with all of these people who are coming in here to really try and protect these things while we still have time and while they still exist. So Cascadia Now itself is a fiscal sponsorship kind of umbrella organization. We sponsor all sorts of events, projects, chapters, groups, and organizations. As long as it's working to help build a positive and inclusive social movement, we think it's awesome and amazing and really want to do it. This is actually David McCloskey speaking, unveiling his kind of new map at the Cascadia Poetry Festival. Third one just happened in Nanaimo that gathers kind of storytellers, poets, artists from all over the Northwest. We have the Cascadia 55th, a scouting association out of Portland. What's wonderful and beautiful is I think they're up to 8 different groups or chapters. We just had their 3rd annual Jamboree. I don't know. I don't know my scouting. But what's beautiful is, so what they've done is they've taken an organization that rather than going to the Boy Scouts, they've created an organization where children of all genders, religions, ethnicities, orientations are welcome to come be a part of it. And that's the kind of inclusivity that we really love and encourage, and that really kind of upholds these values. And it's teaching kids wildcraft and outdoor skills and getting them active and engaged. So then the idea is that when we start talking about Cascadia as a movement for the 15 million people who live here, the possibilities are infinite. And I think we all have ideas, we all have dreams and hopes, and that's really what we want to be supporting. Cascadia Now in the next couple of years is going to be really focusing on these kinds of ideas, of kind of connecting people together, reaching out with local organizations, individuals, as well as businesses that are sustainable, that are local. One of the really exciting projects that we're excited about is this idea of a Cascadia fiber shed. And that's connecting basically people who grow alpacas and sheep with people who turn that into yarn, with people who then turn it into sweaters and connect it to local farmers market. And that's just one example of kind of how this kind of Cascadia framework can come together to create kind of a real impact and interrupt that global consumer and supply chain. And in that sense, Cascadia then becomes something we can be proud of. It becomes a framework where change can happen, and it becomes a home for communities, a platform for support, and a foundation for movements. Cascadia is home, and it's a place that we love and that we want to take care of. So that's it. You're always welcome to look at our website, cascadianow.org. I think the biggest takeaway is that Cascadia, what I love about it, is it's bigger than any one person. I can stand up here and talk, but that has nothing to do with Cascadia as an idea, Cascadia as a vision, and Cascadia as a dream. I think each of you are the Cascadia movement, and that's the most exciting thing to me. And really what I love is seeing all the amazing and creative and intelligent ways that people are utilizing Cascadia, coming to the idea, and really making it their own and doing wonderful and amazing things with that. So I think that's it, and thank you. I think now we'll open it up in more of a discussion format. I'd love to, and so